let's just summarize again the whole classification of the numbers excluding the irrational numbers as, first of all, we have talked about a collection of natural numbers which are starting from the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and so goes on. So after adding 0 in this particular collection, the collection increases in the size, and that collection is nothing but called as a collection of whole numbers which are starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so goes on, which is represented by capital W. Always remember to memorize all the particular notations of the numbers that are nothing but the natural numbers which are represented by capital N, the whole numbers are represented by capital W, integers are represented by capital of Z, rational numbers are represented by capital of Q. So such notations are really very important in order to do the questions. So let's just move on further. After the whole numbers, we have talked about the negative counterparts of the whole numbers along with the 0, and this means that the collection again increases, and this is nothing but a collection which is called as a collection of integers, which is far more way bigger than the collection of naturals, than the collection of the whole numbers. So let's just move on further. Then at the last, we have talked about the numbers which are of the form P by Q, and we know that every natural number is a rational number, every whole number is a rational number, every integer is a rational number. So it means that now the collection is much more bigger than the collection of the integers, and such a collection is nothing but called as a collection of rational numbers. So this one is the biggest collection out of all these collections, and there is one thing which is very important over here, that every natural number is a rational number. Always remember these facts, or we can say that these points are nothing but called as the points to remember. So let us suppose after doing such a representation, we'll move on further towards the points to remember, which are really very important. So I hope this representation is all clear to you, that why we have written all these things or why we have represented all these things in such a form, because we know that every natural number is a whole number, every whole number is also called as an integer, and whole number is also called as a rational, and integer is also called as a rational. So the biggest collection is nothing but a collection of rational numbers. So let's just move on further towards points to remember. What are points to remember over here? The same points that we have discussed earlier, that every natural number is a whole number, every natural number is an integer, every natural number is a rational number. So let us suppose I'm talking about the very first kind of a point to remember is nothing but every natural number is a whole number. It is very much clear to us that every natural number Y is called as a whole number. Let's just move on further towards the third number, where every whole number is an integer. Again, it is very much clear to us that every whole number is an integer, because 0 is an integer, 1 is an integer, 2 is an integer, and so goes on. Every number is an integer. Furthermore, every integer is a rational number. We know that every integer is a rational number because every number in the integer can be represented in the formation of P by Q, and that is why they are called as the rational numbers as well. So there is a very special note over here. Always remember, there is no such vice versa condition. What is the meaning of that? Every rational number is not an integer. Every rational number is not an integer. Why so? Because a number, let us suppose I'm talking about half, 1 by 2. 1 by 2 is a rational number, but it is not an integer. So always remember this thing, that vice versa condition doesn't exist. Vice versa condition doesn't exist in all these three cases. Every integer is not a whole number. Why so? Let us suppose I'll talk about -2. -2 is an integer, but -2 is not a whole number. Again, I'm talking about the first one. Every whole number is not a natural number. Why so? Because 0 is a number which is a whole number, but it is not a natural number. So a vice versa condition, from whole numbers towards the natural numbers, from integers towards the whole numbers, from rationals towards the integer is not possible. So a vice versa condition doesn't exist over here. Always remember this fact, that every rational number is not an integer, every integer is not a whole number, every whole number is not a natural number. So these are some of the points to remember that you always have to remember to do the questions. So let's just move on further. We'll talk about some of the problems now which are related with the very first concept of the collection or the classification of the numbers. So let's just talk about the very first question. Question number 1 says, is 0 a rational number? Obviously, we know that 0 is a rational number because it can be represented in the formation of P by Q. So the first question says that, is 0 a rational number? Can you write it in the form P by Q, where P, Q are integers and Q cannot be 0? So the answer is very easy. So we'll say that, let us suppose I'm talking about the answer of this particular question. So we'll say that, yes, 0 is a rational number. 0 is a rational number. Why so? Because 0 can be represented. Because 0 can be represented in the form of P by Q as 0 can be represented as 0 by 1, which is nothing but a representation of P by Q, where by comparison we know that the value of P over here is nothing but 0 and the value of Q is nothing but 1, where P is equal to 0 and Q is equal to 1. So obviously Q cannot be 0 as per the condition. Q cannot be 0 because we know that the value of Q is nothing but 1. So yes, 0 is a rational number because 0 can be represented in the form of P by Q, as 0 can be written as 0 by 1. 0 by 1 is nothing but P by Q, where by comparison P is nothing but 0 and Q is nothing but 1. So the answer is nothing but yes. So the very first question is, I hope all clear to you, that why 0 is a rational number, because 0 can be represented in the formation of P by Q, where P is nothing but 0 and Q is nothing but 1. Obviously, Q cannot be 0. So this is the answer of the very first question. I hope this is all clear to you.